Welcome back. Early voting is now in its second week in Georgia, with a record number of Georgians casting their ballots so far. More than 1.6 million ballots have already been cast. That's about a third of the total votes cast in Georgia in 2020 and accounts for more than a quarter of all active voters in the state. As for counting all of those votes, Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, says he hopes to have 70 to 75% of the vote reported by 8 p.m. on election night. And with voting ongoing, NBC has new reporting today about how officials are ramping up their security measures at polling places, with measures that include bulletproof vests, snipers, and drones as a result of the hostile political climate. In Cobb County, Georgia, for example, the sheriff will have officers at every early voting site and patrolling local precincts. And in nearby Gwinnett County, the sheriff will be overseeing security for all of its polling sites, even in unincorporated areas typically monitored by local police. And joining me now is Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. You know, I was in Georgia last week in Atlanta for the start of in-person early voting. It was remarkable to see that many people turn out. And as we mentioned, more than 1.6 million votes have already been cast in your state. Are you surprised by that record turnout?
Actually, I'm not. Typically, 65% of our voters vote early, and we're on track to be at that record. And then about 5 to 6% vote absentee, and then the balance of about 30% vote on election day. Actually, your number's out of date already. We're up to 1,761,000. I just checked it a minute ago. Our data hub updates it all day long, and so we're just having great turnout. We're really excited about that.
Oh, thanks. So thanks for that update. And, as we mentioned, you also expect to have counted about 70 to 75% of the ballots by 8 p.m. on election night. So is that because many voters are voting early? And how long do you expect it'll take to count all of the ballots this year?
Well, this year with SB 189, we put into state law that the counties have to have those ballots all ready to be uploaded and reported no later than 8 p.m. So it's state law that they have to do that. So we'll have then probably 65 to 70% of all the votes. Then over the night, we're going to do constant updates of all the voting that happened that day. And we expect to be done by the end of the night.
And so to that point, do you feel an added pressure, obviously with that new law that you mentioned, but do you feel an added personal pressure to count these ballots faster than 2020 to avoid the chaos that ensued after that election?
Well, we've been working with the counties on that, but we also need some additional measures in state law to actually put that in state law so the counties have these responsibilities. And one of those is to get all the absentee ballots pre-scanned that are received before the weekend. And if they do that, then they're ready to be uploaded and reported, tabulated and reported by 8 p.m. Then the early vote is pretty simple. It's already been collected. All you have to do is press the tabulation button. If you sequester, then you're ready to go at 7:01. And many of the counties actually will have a race, to be who can be the fastest. And they'll be trying to see who's the fastest county to report those results. And we'll give them a shout out when they do that, when they hit 7:01. But then we think that just builds confidence and just doesn't give these conspiracy theories enough time to really start germinating.
And Mr. Secretary, as we mentioned earlier, Donald Trump said yesterday that the vote counters are more important than the candidates. What do you think he means by that?
All I know is that voters are important, and that's why we know voting matters, and so do voters, and that's why we work so hard. We want them to have a good experience, and that's why we have really pushed to get those results up early. At the end of the day, we have a verifiable paper ballot. No matter how you vote in Georgia, we have photo ID. We have photo ID for absentee voting. We're one of only 5 states that have that. We have photo ID, obviously, for in-person voting early or election day. That builds trust for voters. Our security paper on the ballots is not something you can buy at the local office supply store. It's going to be, it has the state sealed in it and especially fibers. So that's official ballot. We've also done 2 citizenship checks so we can tell all of our voters that only American citizens are voting in our elections.
And to that point, Mr. Secretary, what do you say to the former president's suggestion that the only way he can lose is if there's fraud?
Well, here in Georgia, we stamped it out. We never really had it in 2020. All those allegations were made. We checked out every single one of them. There weren't 10,000, dead people. There's only 4. And things like that. There weren't 66,000 underage voters. There were 0. At the end of the day, we did a 100% hand recount in 2020. This time we're going to be able to do an audit, and we're actually going to read the human readable text and be able to we have all the ballot images of all 5 million plus ballots. And we're going to do a ballot scan of all of those and do that audit and tell you what the results were for every single race, not just the presidential race. We'll even do county commissioners and also the state reps, state senators. And so there won't be any denying who the winner is, who came up short, and that's our job. Make sure we have fair, fast, and elections that are secure and are accurate. We think that's somewhat important because that's our duty as election officials.
And Mr. Secretary, a new assessment from the intelligence community warns of foreign adversaries focusing on post-election day to sow doubts about the integrity of the results. I'm reading here, foreign adversaries are likely to perceive varying opportunities to undermine each stage of the post-voting process. This period also has a sequence of deadlines that, if missed, could disrupt the normal process and have cascading and varied effects on later stages of the process. Again, that's from an intelligence assessment. How are you preparing for issues after the votes are counted, Mr. Secretary?
Well, we know that here we're going to respond at our office as quickly as we can, but we also hope that there's outside groups that come alongside of us that can have these anti-disinformation campaigns to get out on digital media, very robust campaigns, so they can push back on stuff that's just not supported by the facts. We know that there's bad actors out there, both foreign and domestic, and we want to respond with the facts as quickly as we can before these things start putting up a life of their own.
Mr. Secretary, the RNC says it's assembling a small army of poll watchers to monitor voting locations in cities. Do you worry about voter intimidation in cities like Atlanta?
No, not at all, because we actually put in state law that if you are a poll watcher, you have to go through the poll worker training, so you actually understand what you're looking at. And so that's really important. Once you know what you're looking at, you'll realize that we have so many checks and double checks throughout the system, and we have a verifiable paper ballot. We have photo ID for all forms of voting, so it's safe, secure, and accurate here in Georgia. So bring as many observers as you want. We believe in transparency because we know it's a fair, honest election. The winner will be the winner, and there won't be any doubts.
And Mr. Secretary, before I let you go, a Fulton County judge struck down some of the controversial election rules passed by the state election board. Are you confident that the issue has been put to rest, at least for this year's election?
It has been, because the state Supreme Court just came back and denied they will not be hearing this case. So it's settled. We're moving on with state law, and that's the way it should be. And I've been pushing back against those state election board rules, been very vocal about that. So we're going to do our job. County election officers are going to do theirs, and people are doing theirs. They're coming out to vote, and we think it's a good thing.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger of Georgia, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you luck on what's sure to be a busy couple of weeks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.